Welcome to Daikaiju Fest 2021's panel on 55 years of War of the Gargantuas, where the words are not stuck in our throats. I am your co-host, Kent, and with me is your other co-host.
And I'm Jason. How's it going, peeps?
So we're just continuing, really celebrating a number of films that have significant anniversaries, and that's kind of the meat and potatoes of Daikaiju Fest this year. Again, just to kind of remind everybody, we're not going to be sharing really much, if any, behind-the-scenes information on the production of these films or their reception when they did come out or anything of that sort. There are other resources out there that really do a better, more thorough job. What we're here to do for Daikaiju Fest with a lot of these films is to just celebrate them, to just kind of give our own takes on them, and to just kind of talk about kind of their then either the Godzilla saga, like if they're Godzilla films, or the Gamera saga, if they're Gamera films, or just tokusatsu, or kaiju genre in general, and just kind of give our take as far as where some of these films sit even by today's standards. And so, I guess, Jason, you just kind of want to start us off here with 55 years of War of the Gargantuas.
Yeah, as far as War of the Gargantuas, I know it's been many years since it was our first time watching this. I think it was in the
95.
mid to late '90s was our first viewing. Was this in the was it the TNT MonsterVerse that we
TNT
first?
Monster Vision during Christmas season, actually. Not the Thanksgiving one, but Christmas,
Oh yeah, the good old Monster Vision from good old TNT. I wish they would have done more of those.
in which they were good at one point.
But at least nowadays you can sort of rely on the Comet channel, which you can get free if you have Roku, maybe Fire, Amazon Fire TV or something of this sort. But yeah, it's been with the viewings and stuff over the years. I honestly can't remember the last time I viewed this. Is gosh, when did we last talk about it? Did we do both discussion and the
I know we
commentary?
did a discussion. I can't remember if we did a commentary or not on it. I can bring that up,
But
our list while you talk, but I know we did a discussion on it.
yeah, the it's been the last time I last watched this film was the last time when we discussed on it on our podcast
Wow,
some
because that
time
that had
ago.
to have been probably 7 or so years ago, I would imagine.
Oh God, is that what it's looking like? Um,
Well, I'm not sure, but I'm positive that's probably when we did discuss it.
but yeah, when it comes to War of the Gargantuas, for me, it's I know at first I felt sort of bored, with when you're a kid and everything, when you're seeing these
We
kinds of
didn't do a
films
commentary on it, by the way.
uh, for the first time. So yeah, discussion on it. Um, but yeah, with there being a lot of the talking uh, elements here and there with the film, when you're a kid, doesn't grab you in all that much. But then over time, you really dive right into the film a lot, and it really makes much more sense as you get older. And the film over the years since then has really grown on me, and I really like the characters that are portrayed in this. I mean, you got familiar faces like Kumi Mizuno and Kenji Sahara, and then of course you got familiar faces that portray Sanda and Gaira, like Haru Nakajima as Gaira, and yeah, and then also Jun Tasaki is in this film as well, and it's just for me, it's a really great non-Godzilla, non-Gamera film. It's something like it's a really good standalone kaiju flick without a whole lot of visual effects. I mean, you got match screen and everything in there, but a really terrific um, practical effects, as well as the score done by Akira Ifukube. It's really good film in my right.
Yeah. Again, it's going on not quite, but approaching 26 years for us since we first watched this film. I remember when I saw commercials for this on TNT's Monster Vision back in 1995, and I originally was thinking I wasn't too keen on it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I knew next to nothing about it. That was the first time I had heard about this
Yeah,
film.
same here.
And we recorded it because they were showing some other films, and War of the Gargantuas obviously was a film that we had not seen, but it was paired up with Rodan, which we also recorded, and maybe one other film. And I didn't really know if it was Japanese or not. It just was some giant obscure monster film. And then I remember, I don't know, day or a couple days later, whenever we actually saw it, I actually was blown away by how much I personally enjoyed it. I was not expecting much of anything out of it because, again, I was, let's see, 1995 at that point in Christmas. I was an 11-year-old. So, I had been a Godzilla fan for 3 years, mostly Godzilla related and kind of offshoots like with Mothra and Rodan. But, of course, at that time too, pre-internet days and before there was any real available books and other publications to where you can really learn about this stuff, at
Mm-hmm.
least on a semi-regular basis. I knew next to nothing about it, and I was blown away by how much I enjoyed it. And of course, I realized immediately, I'm like, oh, this is a Japanese production, because not only were there Japanese people, there were familiar faces in the cast and even in the crew as well. And so I initially got excited when I saw those names in the opening credits, and then as the movie went on, I just, other than Russ Tamblyn, who for many years I was like, why is this guy in here?
Same here.
This guy is as stale as Iron Kid's bread, and so why is he here? And for many years, I always thought, he was one of the really the worst thing about this film. To some degree, I still believe that, but the fact that I know now Russ Tamblyn looks back on it and he regrets having just phoned it in. Um, but this has always been a favorite film of mine. I really this film was made at a time in which kind of in that golden era of Toho kaiju films.
Hmm.
It was made a year after Monster Zero, one of my personal favorite
And then
Godzilla films.
the same year as Godzilla vs. Zebra, too.
Yeah, and it just had that same type of aesthetic to it as Monster Zero. And Ifukube's score, I always thought for this was really good. In fact, I listened to the score on this thing last summer. Within a couple months after COVID started, my son, for a short while, got big into listening to scores for the kaiju films. And so we were listening to just some random kaiju scores, including War of the Gargantuas. And, it's a wonderful score. It's very unique. I would argue it's one of Ifukube's more unique scores from that era. And I mean, other than Tamblyn's acting throughout much of this film, I basically love everything about it. It's just, in my opinion, a pretty solid film
Hmm.
that, again, I went in thinking, two giant Yeti Bigfoot looking monsters. This really has the stink of a B movie, but who knows? Maybe something halfway interesting will come out of it, and then realize that it's a Japanese Toho production, and Ishiro Honda directed it, and Kumi Mizuno's in it, and etc. And I'm like, this actually could be good, and it was. And this has
Hmm.
always been a personal favorite of mine. This is a film that I watch at least a couple of times every year. And even my son, when I first introduced this to him 2 years ago, he loved it. It's just special about it. And it's hard for me to put my finger on it because even though Tamblyn is the leading actor in it, and he is really kind of dull drumming his performance, just the uniqueness, the story behind um, this film, it just grips me. And I think again part of it is that aesthetic and that it looks visually similar to Monster Zero. Like I said, that's one of my personal favorite Godzilla films.
Hmm.
And it's hard for me to just put a finger on it other than I just think despite it being a really wacky type of an idea, the story and some of that stuff is just pretty well done, and I love it.
And I think probably one of the reasons, just to kind of piggyback what you were talking about as far as uh, what makes it unique, and then following up with Monster Zero, is that for me, I think the atmosphere of the entire film is sort of what makes it sort of similar to Monster Zero in a way. And I think the performance of both the human characters, and I think, and I believe as well as uh, the guys in in the Sanda and Gaira suits, Haru, uh, Nakajima, and then Yu Sakita or Sakita, however you pronounce his name there. Just the way that these people perform in this movie, I think, and as well as the atmosphere, I think it kind of makes it that similar atmosphere to Monster Zero.
Well, yeah, and again, that whole golden era, I would argue the aesthetics are, if not the same, very similar. Because Mothra versus Godzilla is another personal favorite of mine, and I would argue that the aesthetics, they're not exactly the same as Monster Zero, but I would argue
Right.
they're similar enough. Because that film was made, well, actually, yeah, like a year before. So never mind. I thought I keep
Couple of
forgetting.
years actually.
Well, Monster Zero was produced in '65, the year after
Oh, I
Mothra
was
versus Godzilla.
yeah, I was talking about Mothra versus Godzilla. I thought you were. Never mind.
Yeah, nothing
Continue.
important. Um, but I mean, I guess I don't know how else to say it other than I gush over this film. This is just a personal favorite of mine. I really love the fact, though, too, that Honda and his crew kind of pushed the envelope to some degree with this film too, in which we get Gyra at one, if not two scenes where Gyra, it's implied that he's eating people. And
Hmm.
then we see a couple other scenes where, there are human beings' clothes kind of strewn around as well, especially in the moment leading up to the actual start of the fight between Sanda and Gyra. And I thought, even, for 66, um, standards and the fact that these types of films were already starting to kind of slowly move towards a younger audience being the target audience, that was still kind of a ballsy move on Honda and Toho's part to go that way, because with Godzilla you never really got that. I mean, that you obviously you had the initial film, but no one thought of sequels or anything like that at that point. And all the other Godzilla films, really up until Hedorah, you could argue were clean films. And then
Hmm.
you get Hedorah, which had a lot of gruesome scenes in it. Then you had Gigan, which showed Godzilla getting bloodied several times. And then you skip ahead a couple movies. Well, I guess minus Megalon, that showed stock footage from Gigan of Godzilla getting bloodied.
Right.
But then you skip to Mecha Godzilla, and then Godzilla's almost on his deathbed in that film.
Hmm.
um, the Godzilla films by and large were tame. And sure, this doesn't show blood and guts, although I guess you could argue you get Gyra's blood being shown when that Maser attack occurs. Very well done. And by the way, of course, for those who may not be familiar with much of the Godzilla saga, uh, there's a scene in which Gyra's trying to run away and he's behind a grove of trees and the mazers are taking down all these trees. That stock footage gets used like 3 times in the late 60s and early 70s Godzilla films. I mean, it
Yeah.
just there's some moments in this film that get reused for Godzilla films later on. And it's I don't want to say it's intense because it's not an intense movie, but it sort of pushes the envelope a tad further than what the Godzilla movies were doing at this time. You got Gyra, who is all battered and bloodied during this maser attack, and then you get him. They cut away from him, but he's holding up this woman at an airport that he's attacking. They cut to the sun, and then the next cut is him, chomping at his mouth, and he spits out the gal's blouse or dress.
Hmm.
And then, of course, like I said, later on, you get to see more people's clothing next to him. It pushes the envelope a tad further than what the Godzilla films were willing to go at that time.
Yeah, and I think it might have been more of a Toho decision on the Godzilla franchise, and where they were kind of gearing things more towards kids and everything. But I think when it comes to something that's non that's outside the Godzilla franchise or realm, there I think that they probably have more freedom to do whatever that they want, um, and such. So that's, I think, kind of where that you get some of those kind of pushing the box a little bit, like you discussed there. But yeah, as far as like we were talking about the airport scene, um, I kind of want to touch on the practical effects on this, like as far as the settings, buildings, even the costumes of both Sanda and Gyra. And I think right up to that point, I think that's, in my opinion, I think that's probably one of the best, if not the best, looking practical effects or sets that I've seen in any Showa kaiju film so far.
Yeah, I mean the practical effects work, and again, I don't know what the budget necessarily was um, on this film or anything like that, but it definitely is a good looking film. And again, this is the golden age of Toho. At this point, though, kind of middle, slightly late-ish 60s. Yeah, budgets were already kind of going down a bit, but you really wouldn't see the effects of that until about a year later, really. Yeah, the budget went down this same year for Ibra Horror of the Deep, and then you definitely had to go down more so a year later with Son of Godzilla.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but again, and I don't know too much about the behind the scenes and all that. I don't know. Maybe this was a priority film, so to speak, that maybe they were like, look, this is not only sort of a pseudo sequel to Frankenstein Conquers the World, but this we're definitely going to be done with this particular storyline after this entry. And so maybe they thought, look, we'll just throw this a few extra bucks or so. I don't know. I'm just speculating here.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a very good looking film. And then on top of that, too, of course, um, you had the same crew that had been making most of the Godzilla movies up to this point in time as well. So that definitely says a lot as well. And I just think that uh, you know it, it just it just says a lot with the kind of crew you have. And I'm not sure about the budget deal, but it's a very good looking film. Practical effects wise, yeah, I think it looks good. I think a lot of the golden age of Toho films during this era look very good. Mothra versus Godzilla looks very good. Ghidra, not so much, because that was a incredible rush job. To me, that film and Dagora are at least two exceptions to this because those were rushed. These were three films produced in the same year, and with each entry, first you had Mothra vs. Godzilla, the best looking of the bunch. Then you had Dagora, meh, and then you had Ghidra, more entertaining film, but looked worse than even Dagora, in my opinion, when it came to a number of special effects shots and the execution. A lot of that was just because the same crew and even some members of the same cast were in the same films, and the productions became slightly more rushed with each entry. Um, Toho learned their lesson, and this War of the Gargantuas is a very good looking film, and it is right there with Monster Zero. Again, I think the two films, I keep forgetting that they are made in two different years. I keep thinking they're made in the same year. It's like, no, I mean, still, yeah, they're made within like 12 or so months of each other, but still, they're made in different years and they look very similar. And Monster Zero is a very flawed film in many ways, but it still looks very good in its miniature work and other effects work.
Hmm. Yeah, and um, yeah, as far as the story of, well, I'll just sort of kind of continue on talking here. As far as the practical effects, I really love the detail, especially on the what was it, the Haneda airport, and just the scale of it when comparing it to Haruo Nakajima, who played as Gaira in it, the Green Gargantua, and it's really fascinating. Well, it's also, fascinating in its own right, and how they can scale these life-size venues or places and just like shrink them down to like whatever scale that they plan on doing with these kinds of movies. Because I know, like, when it comes to maybe smaller kinds of kaiju, they make these buildings or sets at a much bigger scale. Whereas when it comes to Godzilla movies, even over the years, the like from the original Godzilla 54, like they were a bit bigger in scale, but then when you go into like the Heisei, they become much smaller. But then like Millennium, it sort of varies depending upon the size of Godzilla in that specific movie. And I just really love like how they take their time building out these like almost like replica in scale buildings to a lot of these films, and even
Well,
airplanes and vehicles.
well, yeah. In this film, like you said, the gargantuas are scaled down more than what we typically saw of the traditional Godzilla film at that point. And when you take a look at Godzilla films, just even around the same time, the miniature work, while still pretty good, didn't look quite as good because again Godzilla and his foes were bigger, and as a result, like when buildings got smashed into, they were more hollow because this, it's harder to be more intricate and to put in more detail into those miniatures the smaller that they get. Here, because the gargantuas are smaller in scale, the miniatures are bigger, and in effect you can put more layers like inside of those miniature buildings. So when I keep it's been replaying in my mind since we started this whole deal where I think it's Sanda at one point like shoves Gyra into a decent size building,
Yeah,
and it's not
it
like
almost
in a
looks
Godzilla
believable.
film where the whole thing collapses. Like only that section in which Gyra lands into collapses, and then it's so the miniatures are so sturdy, and it makes sense, especially for kaiju of that size. And so the miniature work obviously is going to be superior in a film like this because your main kaiju characters are indeed smaller. And that's one of my favorite moments or sequences of this entire film is you get a halfway decent segment where the Gargantuas are in Tokyo, and you get these beautiful miniature sets, and they're throwing each other, in these buildings, and then they end up in a shipyard
Mm-hmm.
as well. And so you get, some of the equipment and stuff being used in that shipyard as well before they end up concluding their battle. In the ocean, or should I say Tokyo Bay, before a random volcano just kind of comes out of nowhere very conveniently. That is one thing I will not, outside of Russ Tamblyn, this doesn't bother me necessarily as much as it does other people, but it bothers me enough that I have to bring it up. That, yeah, it just seems like with some of these
Like
films, and it happened.
it just sort of coincidentally arrives right on time.
Right, and then on top of that too, the possibility of a volcano popping up randomly out of Tokyo Bay is like virtually impossible. Um, it just and it happened in this film's prequel, so to speak, in Frankenstein Conquers the World, in which it just so happened after Frankenstein's monster kills Baragon that the Earth opens up and swallows them both. Um, this is something that I don't know if I should blame Sekizawa, the writer, who was the writer on a vast, if not all of these types of films at that time, and or if I should blame Honda. But this type of thing kind of happens frequently. Either kaiju tumble down a cliff into the ocean, or some freak natural occurrence comes up,
Mm-hmm.
like an earthquake or a random volcano, and takes both or X number of kaiju with it. I've gotten used to it, and of course, I've been a fan for nearly 30 years. And so I've seen these movies enough times to where it's sort of annoying to me still, but it doesn't bother me the way that it initially did, because you just kind of you watch enough stuff and the same films over again to where you're just like, yeah, whatever. You kind of get numb to it. Um, but it's just kind of annoying, really. And
Mm-hmm.
the volcano looks good from a practical effects standpoint. It looks good, but from a story standpoint, it makes no sense.
Right. It's like every time I see that volcano scene, for some reason, it reminds me of that Tommy Lee Jones volcano movie.
Halfway decent movie. I did watch that for the first time since '97 earlier this year. It's actually
Yeah,
still pretty decent.
yeah. I remember seeing, stumbled upon that movie one time on TV some time ago, and I sat and watched it for a little bit, just kind of give me that whole nostalgia to that.
It
But
it it tickled my nostalgia fancy.
well, I bet it did. But yeah, like with the buildings and everything, and all, just the way that they collapse and then stand there, it just makes everything look believable in a way. Just how they stand there, especially when parts of it gets destroyed, like what you were talking about is when I think Gyra pushes Santa into that one skyscraper there. Just the inside part and way how it gets destroyed makes it look believable in a way. But yeah, as far as Gyra and Santa, what do you think of the overall fight between the two Gargantuas there in that movie?
Again, I think it's very brutal. I like the fact, though, too, that because even though they're technically in suits, they're not in like rubber monster suits in which they're trying to, on some level, act like anthropomorphized reptiles. So, kind of like, let's say, for example, you compare Nakajima's Gyra to his 62 King Kong versus Godzilla performance. He still, on some level, was trying, even though Godzilla was very anthropomorphized in that film, he still, on some level, tried to hold back enough to make Godzilla still seem reptilian in nature. And here, that's not the case, because these are gargantuas. They are supposed to be remnants of Frankenstein's monster from the previous film, which was simply a human dressed up in kind of a ragged, um, uh, 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 animalistic type of Frankenstein's monster. Here, they're more Yeti, Bigfoot type um,
Humanoid.
creatures, but very still humanoid. And yeah, they got like kind of their own kind of suits on, but they're still humanoid, and these suits are going to give them more free range of motion as well because of the types of the characters that they're playing. More
Mm-hmm.
humanoid type of kaiju. And so the fight is more visceral. And I really like the fact that it's more visceral because, like we talked about a couple of times already, the fact that the gargantuas just throw themselves, or not throw themselves, but throw each other into some of the miniatures and stuff like that. It seems to be, in a sense, slightly more brutal than what you got in a lot of the Godzilla films. And the fact, too, that neither one of these gargantuas has some sort of beam or laser attack or some sort of distant type attack. The only way they can fight each other is hand to hand, and as a result, you get what you see here.
Yeah, and I real yeah, you get more believable fights, battles between both Santa and Gyra with them being humanoid. And when it comes to like a lot of the Godzilla fights and everything, some of them can be men in suits, or sometimes they probably not. Like for instance, Mothra in a way is obviously not a not a man in a suit sort of situation. So like when it comes to those things, I think they're probably trying to be a little bit more careful when it comes to those certain things, to where that they try not to destroy some of the suits that they're in. But I think with how both Gyra and Sanda were designed, I think they were made to be in more of a physical sort of bouts, kind of make things a little bit more believable in this movie. And also when it comes between those two, like before their whole fight against one another, like they have at least the kind of the human senses in a way that they can understand even humans, well, mainly Sanda in a way, but that they can at least understand one another. You kind of see when Gyro was injured by the military, and then Santa comes in and sort of, rescues him and everything. That they kind of have these feelings and emotions much more different than the Godzilla and Gamera monsters. They're, well, Sans, I would say, King Caesar and Khan and everything. But yeah, and yeah, it's just much more of a physical bout, and I think that there are, and the stakes I think are a little bit more different when it comes to these two, rather than the Godzilla and Gamera battles. There, where you got one Gargantua that was raised by humans and understands how they are and everything, and then you got the other Gargantua that wasn't raised by humans and eats them and everything. And so, and then of course, with right when the bout happens, you get Santa coming along with Gyra laying down there, and then he sees all these clothes. Then he's like, "What have you done?" And it's like, "Beat the shit out of you." And then it goes from there.
I
Yeah,
like how he just very calmly, like, slowly rips a tree out from the nearby hill, and Gyra is just so stuffed. He's like, whatever.
where it's like he just sort of looks at him, at Sanda, and then Sanda is just sort of staring at him, and then just grabs the
Yeah, like,
tree.
he's raising the tree, and Gyra, either Gyra's stupid or he just doesn't care. He's just
Well,
kind of like.
maybe he sort of is because he was born from the natural environment. Maybe was it radioactive activity or something of the sort?
No, 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 no. The explanation that at least the English dub gives was that other micro sea life like ate the
That's it.
cells of the Frankenstein monster and created Gyra, which then you would think, okay, then Gyra should be like a
Much
Destroya
more,
type
yeah,
creature
maybe a little
where
bit more different. Yeah, compared to Sanda in a way. Yeah,
no, I'm sorry. The flesh didn't come from the Frankenstein monster. It came from Sanda. Sanda came from Frankenstein's monster. Gyra came from Sanda.
yeah, yeah. So,
Begat, begat.
so yeah, Gyra should have been a little bit more different, but I don't know that they probably just wanted to be sort of twins in a
I mean, I
way.
think it works very well. I mean, it's still, a lot of fans always say, well, Toho science, because Toho science dictates what happens in X film. Toho science dictates how kaiju become X kaiju
Yeah.
in X films. So, I mean, you go with it. Look, if your problem is how Gyra got made in a film about giant hairy beasts, then you got bigger problems. So, you know.
Well, but yeah. Anyways, is there anything else that you want to discuss on War of the Gargantuas?
Not really. I mean, I think we've covered everything. To just kind of give my concluding thoughts and just like a 10-star rating out of this, again, I think it's near perfection. I think the only thing that really holds it back is Russ Tamblin's performance. And I know for odd number of years since then, has sort of regretted just phoning it in. But by and large, I think it's a very well done made film. Is it perfect? No. But is it entertaining? Fuck yeah. I mean, it truly is one of my favorite Toho non-Godzilla films. This is one of those rare films, not just in the kaiju genre, but in a general sense, in terms of just talking about movies. For me, that I could watch on repeat and really never get tired of. I really love the pacing of this film. I love how it looks. I love the story. It's just sheer entertainment that just it grabs me in a way that few films do, and it keeps me attentive during its entire runtime, and I love it. I mean, I really do. This is a really solid film, and I can forgive it by and large for the volcano at the end. Tamblin's performance I've gotten used to, but it's still so obviously phoned in that it still is somewhat slightly jarring at points. It's still kind of hard sometimes to get past that, but it's still a solid film. So I give it 9.5 out of 10.
Wow. Yeah, and since the last time I watched this film many years ago, and now I'm sort of tempted to watch it again.
Better.
Um, maybe later tonight or tomorrow. We'll see.
No,
It's
we got
been,
more DKF,
yeah,
Jason.
yeah,
More
I know.
DKF. You can't go anywhere. You can't go anywhere. You got to change shirts for the next panel,
If that's the case, but um,
depending upon how you edit this.
yeah, yeah, it's yeah, just overall with couple minor complaints here and there. It's a really good film overall with the acting minus one of them. Not going to get into. Um,
Tamblin, I'll say it. I will say it.
and the the story to the whole film, it's really good. The practical effects, the suits for both Sanda and Gyra are terrific. The battles between those two kaiju is really good and makes it really believable, and I'd say more physical than a lot of the kaiju movies that we've seen um, over the years. Even some of the new ones, I'll probably say, besides the whole MonsterVerse thing.
Nothing tops
Uh,
that.
yeah. um, yeah, it's and then with the minimal visual effects that they put into this, it's just a really, really good film. really outstanding. Something that I wish I would have kept watching since the last time I've watched the film. Um, yeah, it's just, gosh, yeah, it's just an overall, just in its own right, with it not being part of both the Godzilla and Gamera, uh, and even the Ultra franchises, a really good kaiju film. And with the rating out of 10, I would at least give this a 9 out of 10.
Blasphemy, sir. It's got to be at least a 9.5.
Well, minus the Tamblin and then the volcano thing.
Oh, you finally said Tamblin. You got some cajones on you.
Well,
All
like I
right.
said, I'm not diving too deep into it.
Yeah. Well, that concludes our 55-year anniversary discussion on War of the Gargantuas. We thank you so much for joining us, and we hope you have enjoyed our Daikaiju Fest this year and continue to enjoy it. Thank you so much for watching.
Take care.